All right, ladies and gentlemen, the moment we've all been waiting for. Let's put this thing together. I have the 2 castings in the oven. I have the impeller shaft with the bearings already put on it, along with my Teflon washers. They're really more bearing seals. That's in the freezer. So I'm going to go get the castings out of the oven. So stand by, let's do this. And here are cupcakes I prepared earlier. Hope they're not hot enough to actually, let me see how hot that is. It's warm. When making muffins this way, ingredients matter. All right. Bye-bye. All right, here's the well-frozen shaft. First thing we have to do is take the spring washers. We can't forget the spring washers. Let's put them in the bottom. Let's do this now while everything is, we're striking while the aluminum's hot. Okay, here you will see the Teflon washers, which are really seals. They're different thicknesses, but I'm not going to talk because I want to do this quick. Oh, look at that. It just dropped in. It's the greatest thing ever. Okay, this is a little hot. She's a little warm, fellas. But, did I forget something? Let me just think. Let's make sure. Because we could still conceivably take it apart. Let me peek in there. It's there. That's there. That's there. Ooh, and it spins. Exciting times for a young lad. So there's our little drive. You can see some of the lube. It's actually going to want to work its way out the back, but you know, whatever. We'll worry about that. At least we can definitely refill that bearing. It turns. It turns. All right. So now, let's start putting some of these casting screws in. So I'm going to, while I'm doing this, I'm going to, let me get a paper towel, because I will need it. Anti-seize is your friend, particularly when you're using stainless hardware into aluminum. It will gall if you don't use it. It's not like it might gall. Eventually, a bolt will gall. It's actually really common. So always use anti-seize, and I have like a lifetime supply of this Rector Seal nickel-rich stuff. This is the high-temp stuff. This is just go ahead and throw down for the high-temp stuff. Don't use the cheap aluminum stuff. I use that for years, and you know, then your bolts get all crusty when it dries out. This stuff is designed specifically for this sort of ridiculous temperature scenario. Well, for the headers anyway. All right, so we'll just drop one in there. We will just drop one on the opposite side. You don't need a lot of this stuff, just, you know, so the mating surfaces don't actually interact. This was a display unit. That's probably why they're using stainless hardware. But there's actually no anti-seize or anything on here, like from the factory, which I thought was kind of a weird choice. But whatever. It doesn't really matter. I hope I still have them all. They've just kind of been sitting in the corner of my desk since we started this mess, which was what? November, October? I don't remember. It's been a while. But finally, the moment has arrived. I don't know about you, but I am literally verklempt with anticipation. There's another bolt. I have enough on my fingers now where I don't have to dip anymore. Oh, you know what? There is something I forgot, and it's too late now. Oh, that's sad. It's not really a big deal. I was actually going to put this Viton O-ring material in the groove. because, you know, it needs to be sealed in normal operation. Like the finger, it needs to be sealed in normal operation because otherwise, you know, it's got engine oil being sprayed through it. We don't have that issue anymore. So you know what? We're going to live without that. I knew I forgot something, but honestly, if that's what I forgot, I can live with it. So if you want a closer look at those Teflon washers, you know, just go back and pause the video or play it in quarter speed or something. But those actually turned out pretty cool. The thinner one, I couldn't get to cut straight, so it developed this crown. So I put the crown side towards the bearing. So there actually is some drag there. Is it going to be an issue? I don't know, in all honesty. I do know I just got anti-seize on my drink. Dum-dum. All right, so I'm going to disappear real quick while I find the... Wait a second. Yeah, while I find the right hex key, which, you know, really is going to be right here. And the question is, do I just... What are these, 5s? It is not a 5. Oh, you know what? These are not going to be metric. That's right. All the Vortech hardware is actually standard or imperial. Let's see. I have a imperial Allen key set here. Is there a big enough one? There might be. That's too big. Mix size down. But this one. This is one of those Allen key sets. I don't even know where I got it from. It's a AAA. It's probably from the 70s, it looks like. Again, no idea where it came from, but doesn't matter. Don't care. So let's just work these in. And I will speed this part up. Okay. So now that all the bolts are drawn in, you noticed I was working in an approximate like star pattern. With castings like this, you never want to go in a circle, even though, you know, maybe your obsessive compulsive side might be inclined to do that. You really, ideally, want to start in the middle. So like if you don't have a bolt torque sequence for something, this is always a nice safe way to do it. So you start in the middle and you go one side, other side, and then up here and here and here and here. And then probably here and here and here and here. That way, as you apply pressure to the whole casting, it kind of evenly spreads out. It's sort of like applying like packing tape. You know, if you just put the ends down first, you're inevitably going to get a wrinkle in the middle of it. This kind of does the same thing. So anyway, so it's not quite seated all the way down, but with the bolts, I'm sure we'll get it there. So let's just start drawing it in a little bit. We'll do a quarter turn at a time all around, until we are, in fact, seated. Even with very little torque, it's basically already seated at this point. So I'm just going to go around one more time, and if I was smart about this, I would find that little 1/4-inch ratchet and be using that. Actually, nope, don't know where it is. All right, so we'll just keep going with this. So let's do one final go round on all these guys. Of course, these work themselves loose as we tighten the others. So I'm not really setting any kind of specific torque here. Just kind of going by feel. This doesn't need a crazy amount of pull down, so to speak. We'll tell you though, this Allen wrench is a very tight fit. Okay, so let's go up here. Okay, so now we're tight. I'm probably going to go through and retorque them at some point in the future, but we do know everything is kind of snug. So let me walk you through what we've got here. Throw that out of the way for the time being. So typically in a Vortech, there's a carbon seal in the front. So this is actually, remember that Teflon rod I was waving around like Harry Potter? So this is what I made out of that rod. This is all I needed it for, but it, you know, was cheapest actually to buy that giant hunk, believe it or not. But now I have stuff for other uses. So they normally have a carbon seal here that actually rides on this particular shaft, right? So Normally, that's the way Vortech likes to do it, but I didn't want to, if you saw the price I'd see, you'd be like, yeah, not happening. Not only that, we actually don't need a seal here because there's no oil flying around anymore, thanks to Kluber Lubrications Isoflex NVU15, which, by the way, is like this really sort of creamy off-white color. Do not confuse it with toothpaste. But, almost kind of reminds me of like hand cream or lanolin or something, but I'm sure for 42 bucks, I'm sure it's not. So anyway, so I made this seal out of Teflon. Now it's not really a seal. It's not actually touching the shaft. There is like 1 to 1.5 thousandths of clearance on both sides. Now the washers that you saw earlier, the bearing seals really, that you saw earlier, those actually, the thicker one is not touching the bearing. There's a little bit of space. The smaller one, like I said, I had a hard time parting it off. I could have parted it off with like a square tool, I guess, and not done that curve thing because the parting blade was actually bending while I was trying to part it off. And it was causing the washer itself to sort of have this concave shape to it. Anyway, so I decided to use that to my advantage because I tried several times. Here's another one. Here's one of my first attempts. Even though this kind of probably looks flat under camera, it's not. It has this concave shape on this side and it's convex here. But, you know, it works as a frisbee. So, you know, I decided to use that to my advantage. And that's the only place where there's any drag. That lip of the Teflon washer, the outside lip, is actually riding on the bearing shell itself. So this is the old bearing shell, and this is one of my failed attempts. It actually just physically rides on it. It pushes against it. So that's the only place there's any sort of contact actually happening in here. And, you know, it's going to wear. Sure, it's going to wear. But do I really care about the wear particles? I mean, it's Teflon. No, that's probably going to be totally harmless. So I'm going to let that wear in. Everything else is more or less good. You know, I mean, you can spin this. It's actually quite easy to turn, believe it or not. But there's definitely some drag here. You know, again, the first time we power this thing up with that motor, which I may actually have to increase the startup RPM or startup power rather in the ESC. By the way, here's another quick thing. So I wanted to give a shout out to Thomas at Castle Creations. He's the guy who really knows what he's talking about. If you have questions about brushless motors, you know, try to buy their products, obviously, but go ahead and call and ask for Thomas. The guy is a rock star. He knows what he's talking about, and he gave me some tips on the ESC, which I'll address on the electronic portion of this. But this is the mechanical portion. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to stop the camera, and I want to put the impeller on before I mount the motor. So I'm going to stop the camera. I'm going to let all this get nice and chill. I may put this in the freezer. I may put this in the oven just so it all drops on. The one thing I cannot forget is this washer. This washer is very specific. It has a groove for, there's like literally a radius there. So there should be room for this thing to come down, and there is. So this, whoop, as I throw it across, you can actually see wear marks around the periphery of this particular washer. This is hard, and this is not, you know, like a dollar store washer or Home Depot washer. This is a very specific piece, and I'm sure it's rather hard. I'm not going to try to file test it because we don't care. But the point is, I want it to rest on the radius of that shaft. I'm going to try to punch in post so you guys can see that. And in case you're wondering why I have this gnarly napkin with these dirty bolts sitting here, those are for the motor mount. That's going to be part 2 after I get the impeller on. So let me do the impeller drop first, and then we will, in fact, I'm just going to, so I don't forget this, I'm just going to leave it here, and we're going to use that to our advantage. Because, you know, right now I don't think this is going to, well, no, especially since this is warm, I'm not even going to try it. So stand by. I'm going to stop the roll here and pop this stuff. Like I said, this is going in the freezer. This is going in the oven. And hopefully it slips on. It should be less of an interference fit than even the bearing, so it shouldn't take much effort at all. So that's where we are. So stand by, and I will be back with you guys shortly. All right, at this point, the blower housing's been in the freezer for a little bit over half an hour or so, and the impeller has been in the oven on warm. Actually, I got it up to temperature and shut it off. It doesn't need to be hot. You will notice that I have added WD-40 to the plan here, and that's primarily because I want to use it for what it actually stands for, water displacement. Because when I bring that, and I'm doing all this now because I'm not going to have a lot of time when I'm doing it. I learned that the hard way with the anti-spark nonsense in the other video. If you saw that, you'll know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so again, I'm using this for water displacement because the second I bring that casting and the blower housing out, particularly the impeller shaft, is going to start getting water condensing on it. I don't necessarily want to put any lubricant or anything on that shaft because it's basically a light interference fit. But what I don't want is any sort of water in there because, you know, I don't know what kind of steel that shaft is. It's some sort of hard stainless, you know, kryptonite. I have no idea, but you saw what it took to drill it. I have a whole video devoted to drilling that stupid hole. Yeah, that could be taken several ways, but we know what we're talking about here. You know, if you know the video I'm talking about, I'll put a link in the description. There's a reason why I called it what I did. Anyway, getting back to this. So I'm going to use this to wipe down the shaft just to get rid of any water because I don't want there to be any sort of corrosion that takes place because I'm sure there, you know, one is more cathodic and cathodic? And one is more anodic than the other, and there's going to be a little bit of a voltage differential. So I just want to make sure it doesn't seize up on me because, you know, with stuff like this, invariably you do end up pulling it apart, you know, as we think of ways to improve it and or hopefully make it work, or hopefully it works and just ways to improve it. That was kind of a full circle. So anyway, so that's why the WD-40 is here. Now I'm going to go get the parts. So here's the casting. It's not as cold as I would like for it to be, but you know, as long as the impeller is warm. Let's get a little bit of water displacement formula 40. Just to make sure there's no water on that thing. That should be adequate. All right, let's go get the impeller. So here is the impeller. I'm wearing TIG gloves because it's a little hotter than I would like. But if we get this right, it should just slip right on. It should just slip right on. Nope. Could always press it on, but alright, this is going to get a little tricky. I need something softer than the aluminum with a hole in it. Let's lose the gloves because time is precious. What if we were to, let's see, this is going to be a one hit at a time kind of thing. Until we get it down to where we can use the nut to draw it on. Let's go ahead and try to, that thing is still hot. She's moving. What I really don't want to do is crack on one of the blades. I know you people at home are cringing every time I swing the rubber mallet. Heck, I'm cringing every time I swing the rubber mallet. I think I'm going to have to press this on the rest of the way, so I'm going to walk this thing over to the press. It's going to be less likely to damage it. Hopefully it's not putting any sort of crazy pressure on the actual bearings, because that would be clearly a bad thing. But obviously you see it spins. There's a little bit of resistance, but that's just the Teflon. So I guess let me go to the press. I'll be back when it's on. Hopefully I don't damage it. Alright, so this is a classic case of you win some, you lose some. I just thought I would let you guys know how I'm actually getting this thing on. I didn't like the idea of pressing it. I didn't like the idea of using a box wrench or a ratchet on here because I had to put a lot more force on these impeller blades than I wanted to. So I decided, you know what, I put a little bit of anti-seize on this, and especially on the surface where it mates with the impeller. And by the way, this might be why this one's a display unit. Maybe the impeller is too small, or the hole in the impeller is too small, or the shaft is maybe just a hair too big. Because, you know, you guys saw how easily the bearing slipped in, but this has proven to be a bit of a bear. So this is what I discovered that actually works. Just a little impact driver, 9/16 nut, welding glove. Learned that from last time. I suppose now I'm going to have to go get a deep well. So here's a 9/16 deep well. Let's have at it. Nice thing about these little impact drivers is they can only apply so much torque. And eventually it will stop. Now, I don't know how far down I really actually want to go with this. Right now it's kind of flush with the back plate. I don't know, we call that good? Yeah, let's call that good. You know what actually the deciding factor should really be? Does it touch the compressor housing? That probably should be the litmus test. Alright, so here's the compressor housing. And it does not. So something tells me this is where it's staying. I may end up taking that nut off and putting some Loctite on it, you know, the removable kind, because I don't like the idea of a nicely lubricated nut. And there probably isn't enough room for it to sneak out through there. So don't like that thought, but I mean, it does turn in the direction that it would tighten the nut, but you get the idea. So yeah, so I think we're just going to leave it right there. So we have to, well, we don't have to, but I'm gonna. Yeah, I've sang the praises of Loctite 565 before. Greatest sealant ever. Really, seriously. It never hardens, but it will seal everything. Fuel, not a problem. Oil, not a problem. Everything. So again, you know, I mean, this stuff is really nicely made, so I really think this is kind of just excessive, but, you know, electric superchargers do have their challenges, so why not give them the best shot at happiness possible? Just spread that out. It's a little tacky, maybe. Be a good way to describe it, but like I said, it never actually hardens. If I have enough. Yeah, that's probably adequate. Let's not get crazy. In fact, when you close it, there's always a little bit more that comes out. So, there's your little bit more that came out. Alright. So now this seems like an opportune moment to finally protect this impeller, because honestly I was concerned that this thing was out in the open for as long as it was, and really didn't get damaged, I guess. We may be swapping this out for an SI impeller or something if you know, we need to make more power in the future, which, as hard as that was, I ain't looking forward to that. But if we're swapping it out, if we damage it, who cares? So it does spin. It doesn't freewheel, again, because of the that Teflon bearing thing. So we'll just kind of clock this approximately how I want it clocked, and that's going to actually be easiest to see from this perspective. So let's get these bolts out of the way, even though those bolts are kind of happening next. So you'll notice that I just punched out this seal. If I need to inspect something, this is basically going to be an inspection hatch is what it's going to amount to. So you know, let's just line this up. I think there are 3 clamps. The clamps. 1, 2, 3. Same exercise as before. Let's just make sure we're happy with the orientation of the discharge, which actually I'm going to want it to go up a little bit, so I'm going to cheat it just a wee bit. Thinking ahead, you see that? Thinking ahead. All right, back with the nasty anti-seize, because these are short bolts, but you know. Remember, there are no small bolts, only small holes. It's a corollary of that old actor idiom. Idiom saying. I sound a bit like an idiom. But that's okay. We all have our moments. Unfortunately, my moments are all the time. So here's two more. Suppose I should make some minimal effort to get that actually on the threads. Yeah, that's just how I roll. Okay, next one. She's a wee bit roly-poly here. But that's okay, I like them like that. Kidding? Well, depends on what you think I'm talking about, doesn't it? And by some miracle, so far, all the hardware we need has managed to stay in that one plastic dish since I took it apart. Okay. I know what you're thinking. Alex, move the blower up into the frame. And you're probably right. Let's do that. Okay, that's a little overkill on that one, but there's no kill like overkill. All right, let's get that nasty stuff off our hands, aka greasy paws. Set that off to the side. I am rather excited. Did you really think we'd get to this point? I mean, who knows? It might still not work. You know, the engineer guy, I believe his name was Steve, and I only remember that because I wrote down his number with the name Steve and no other information on my desk, and I just found that post-it note. I'm like, who's Steve? Oh, that's Steve. This one's not going to fit. I keep reaching for the metric wrench knowing it's not going to work. So somewhere over... yes. The old AAA gag. Where's the... I bet it's going to be the same wrench. Bet you any money. Indeed. Now for this, it's not really tightening a casting. It's more snugging down clamps. I'm not going to really be that overly concerned, but I'm still going to go through the effort of tightening them up over here. Alright, so far, with the exception of this gaping hole here, no comments on that, please, this is basically like assembling a Vortech, but this is where it gets different. Thank you very much, AAA. Your service is much appreciated, wherever you came from. Okay, so, like I said, this is where it gets different. So one thing I'm definitely going to have to do here is I am going to definitely have to stop down. I do have to take a measurement, and it was impossible to take until now because I need to know exactly how far down that threaded hole is. That, remember the whole ASMR, AMSR, ACRP, whatever, that video where I drilled that hole. You know, that's where our hex drive is going. So I do have to stop down, take a couple of measurements. I'm sure I'm going to have to knock out a quick little washer, and we're going to put the drive bolt in, and then we're going to put the motor on. So stop down number 2. All right, I'm back. So I popped out in the garage and took some leaded stainless. It's supposed to machine nicer than regular stainless. And it machined okay. But you know, my parting tool had a real problem with it. But here's our washer. This thing was supposed to be 3 millimeters thick, but it's actually a few thou under. You can see it's chamfered. I actually used a chucking reamer to get exactly 6 millimeters, so there's practically no slop on the bolt. Here's the bolt, by the way it's cut down. We're going to have a little bit over 7 millimeters of engagement. You know, using the old rule, depending on the material, to 1 to 2 times thread engagement. I figure we're a little bit over 1, 1.1, 1.2, maybe somewhere in there. So this should work, and this is basically our fusible link, by the way. So this has to go in so we can put the motor on. So let's put it in. Hopefully my math is right, but hey, even if my math is wrong, we can always do it again. So let's see. Let's drop this thing in here. Here's a 10 millimeter deep well. I haven't put this in yet, so I hope it catches. Let's see. Let us see. May have to use the old pencil eraser trick. Fortunately, I happen to have a pencil right here. What I don't want to do is lubricate this at all, because eventually this is going to have to be Loctited in place. Alright, it's not cooperating. Probably not much of a surprise because I didn't put much of a chamfer on the end of the bolt after I cut it to length. Let's see. Maybe is this going to reach in there far enough? It does. Let's see if we can coax it in. I don't feel like that's actually doing anything. Wait, is it? Yes, it is. Okay, cool. Alright, so there we have it. Let me find a ratchet of some sort. I mean, I don't want to put Loctite on this thing yet until we've had a chance to run it through its paces a little bit, but I probably would be smart to, you know, at least hit this with a little bit of torque, if nothing else. So let me go grab a adapter for the impact thing. Let's kind of hammer it into place. That should be adequate. I can see the grease in there. If I was smart, maybe I would take a Q-tip. If I was smarter, I would keep this in frame. Let's just get any schmutz out, because we don't want that to work its way into the grease. Let me go ahead and cut said Q-tip with a pair of wire cutters so I can really get in there. You know, maybe if there's any sort of anything, this should deal with it, I would think. Alright, let's bolt on the motor. See what that works out like. Alright, so you've probably noticed this conspicuous dark red dot there. It's actually there for a reason, because even though this is concentric and there's almost no play in this whole assembly with these registering bosses on the motor, there's still one way where it lines up better than others. So I put red dots on this as well. So I know that if I line up the red dots, we should be good to go. Now, of course, this is also the reason why these nasty bolts are up here. And if I line those up, these bolts should drop in. So these are a little longer than the others, just simply because this piece is a little thicker. Now, I've also actually taken this thing apart and reassembled it just to make sure that it stayed in its proper orientation, centered perfectly in the hole. And it did. So that's what this Allen key's been here for this whole time. Let's make sure we're good. Feels good. By the way, I finally got around to drilling these holes, obviously. And you can put them in any orientation. They aren't actually that accurate. That took me a while because, you know, not a machinist. And I've also obviously put the anti-seize on these particular bolts. So that should be plenty tight. And there's also a registration mark here, and it's right there. So I know that this needs to go in. Is that really engaged? Let me see if I can feel it. Indeed it is. I love it when a plan comes together, don't you? Puts happy thoughts. Okay. Let's see here. I clearly underestimated the length of my arms here, or overestimated the length of my arms because I'm constantly working in the bottom of the frame. I'll just punch in on that probably. In which case I shouldn't have said that because you wouldn't know the difference had you not seen this framing. So I use this to just kind of get it in the zone because I still want to tighten it with the Allen key by feel. So this is exciting, isn't it? Looks like she's coupled. And there was absolutely no force required to get it to seat. So I probably could have used a thicker washer there, and I may actually make one. The stock is still chucked in the lathe. It'd be easy enough to do. I have a real hard time measuring, getting parting at an accurate distance. All right, ladies and germs, I give you the electric Vortech. Check it out. Let's see if I can place this in a way where you can at least partially see the impeller. And that noise is, of course, it bouncing between poles. So it's there, it works, it's coupled together, it spins as freely as the motor does anyway. Subscribe.